First of all, I should introduce you. So you are Evgeny Afineevsky. Have I pronounced your name correctly?
You're pronouncing it very correct.
So you came to my attention a while ago with a film about Syria, Cries from Syria, and a film about the Ukraine, and also a very entertaining feature film called Oy Vey, My Son is Gay, with a great cartoon in a title sequence. Nobody does cartoon title sequences anymore.
True, but you know what? If you will look at the audience tired in these days from the drama and from the old darkness of today's world. And if you will take a step back into our childhood, when we were just being entertained, you're opening a comic book and you're enjoying this. You're opening a TV and you're enjoying cartoons. I was raised in the cartoons and former Soviet Union. So I think to try to appeal to young and to the old and to make it more kind of universal, you do it with the cartoons. And it allows you to bring also different elements into the acting, like you can play over the top kind of thing, which I carried in my comedy. But again, we're talking about 2009 when I did the comedy.
Yes, but the other thing you did there was you introduced us to your characters from the moment the film began, and we're here today to talk about Francesco, your documentary.
Which I don't was the animation at all.
But you introduce us
and reality into this, and specifically because it was done in the pandemic.
Yes,
and I was filming also a lot of stuff during the pandemic. I think it's more horrifying in a certain way, but in the same time, it brings more hope because it shows the past into the future. It shows the ability to overcome the difficulties and darkness of today's world, division, what we can say, climate change, refugee crisis, inequality, and all these things, pandemic, racial issues. I think what movie teaches us that we all still have a better future if we will sit for a moment, see what's surrounding us, what we already created, and rethink every action that we're taking in today's world. I think that's what was Francesco for me. And if we compare this to all other movies, and like you said, starting with Oy Vey, where I try to bring unconditional love message, that love is love, I'm still through the darkest themes of Francesco, I bring in the same exactly message.
Exactly.
That love is love between all human beings in this world, and we need to start to cherish this love among us. We need to start to respect each other and stop destroying each other.
Yes, but I think what's extraordinary about the documentary about Francesco, and actually a little bit about Oy Vey, is just how visual you are, and how you've got a story here with the documentary, which could sound a little bit I was going to say pontifical, but there of course it literally is pontifical. It could sound a little bit preachy. It's not. It just washes over us. You've got so much visual imagery. I mean, can I slightly anticipate and let people know what they're in for? Because your opening scenes, we see Francis, and then we see these empty streets, and it's...
Come la tragica pandemia di coronavirus ci sta dimostrando, abbiamo mancato nel custodire la terra, la nostra casa giardino. L'abbiamo inquinata, l'abbiamo depredata, mettendo in pericolo la nostra stessa vita.
This is a man who's opened his heart to the hearts of all of humanity. This is a man who cries with humanity, who laughs with humanity, who suffers with humanity. This is Pope Francis.
La humanidad vive una crisis que no es solamente económica y financiera, también es ecológica, educativa, moral, humana. I'm convinced that we can make a difference. I'm sure. Pedimos perdón por los abusos sexuales por parte de miembros cualificados de la Iglesia.
Un'altra volta. E per questo, perché tutti siamo fratelli, vogliamo la pace.
Ser la voz, pero no de una manera programática, me sale solo. Y también por mi sangre migrante. Una persona che pensa soltanto in fare muri e non fare ponti non è cristiano.
I think God made him experience what people experience.
Queda feo que lo diga un papa, no sé. Las quiero mucho.
And then you do these wonderful drone shots of an empty Rome, an empty so many cities.
Of the world, team. Empty streets of the world.
Well, I noticed London as well.
Yes, so London and Berlin and Paris and Buenos Aires and Milan and it's China, it's Kiev, it's St. Petersburg, it's Spain. It's like almost every Argentina, Buenos Aires, Tel Aviv. So it's no, it's not Tel Aviv. It's Jerusalem. Sorry.
Yes.
It's almost every place in the world. But I think, as we know, the St. Peter Square in Rome never empty, and specifically when the Pope there, it's never will be empty. But here we see the darkness. We seeing the something that really brings audience to the cold shower, awakening audience to something that you can't even imagine. Maybe in a nightmare you can imagine something like this, because for me it's like a scene from the end of the world where we can see the lonely one human being who is left on the earth because the rest is kind of vanished. And for me, this scene exactly symbolizing this, that if we will not really pay attention to this horrific image of him being alone at that present moment in history, in a world, then we will disappear. And he, as the white angel in his white dress, going through the darkness. You know, it's interesting. One of the great painters of Rome, my pal, he's a street artist. He did a drawing based on this scene. And you know what, since we're talking about this, I will show you, it's remarkable. It's actually interesting drawing.
There we are.
Pope alone and through the darkness and spreading love. You know, it's interesting because at the end of the day, that's what can happen to us. We will vanish.
But you managed to capture his sense of humor as well. So in all this darkness, there's an extraordinary lightness. It's a sort of a lightness of touch, both as a filmmaker and the subject of the film. There's a lightness of touch.
I never saw him just as the Pope. From the day one when I started to do this project, for me he was great humanitarian. He is great human who is down to earth. From all my work with him and observations, and from all my learning and being around him, he is a great, humble human being. You will not feel any superiority if you're meeting in today's world any leader or any head of the state, and he is a head of the state, any kind of head of the face, they are still have certain degree of superiority because they are who they are. You're not feeling this with him. And that's the remarkable thing about Jorge Maria Bergoglio or Pope Francis. And for me, he will be always this great humanitarian, great person, great leader and role model for the people.
Yes. I mean, one of the great scenes in the film is the scene where he gets the children and the families, the Muslim children and families, and brings them to dinner or lunch, I think, is it in Castel Gandolfo?
No.
It's in the Vatican.
Casa Santa Marta.
Right, I see. There we are. So
you're seeing him actually smiling and enjoying, and he's happy, and that's the remarkable thing.
And the scene in the aircraft where he's showing the children's pictures as well, and there's such warmth there. It's charming. I think you perhaps didn't show just how innovative he's been. I mean, it's implied. But among the various cardinals that he's created, I mean, he's stamped his mark on the Curia. Even if he's got problems with the Curia, he's stamped his mark on it. The next pope is going to be in the mould of Pope Francis. But one of the cardinals that he made, he's done something extraordinary. He's made a cardinal out of a priest, out of somebody who's not even a bishop. It is possible. It certainly hasn't been done in modern times that I know of. This is a cardinal from Albania, a country I know very well, and I was extraordinarily surprised. I mean, he's too old, I think, to vote in the next election. I think he's now 93 or something.
But he made cardinals from many people who not been bishops. I can tell you that.
Yes,
I know priests who became cardinals.
Yes, but this is very, very unusual. I don't think the previous popes, I certainly don't think John Paul II or Benedict did this at all. And John Paul I didn't really have time, sadly. And he reminds me a lot of John Paul I. This open smile, this openness.
He reminds you the first or the second?
The first. He reminds me very much of John Paul I, who I met very briefly before he became Pope. And he has that same open character, and I think what a charming. I thought, I was very young. What a charming man, and I think the same thing about Francis. What an incredibly charming man, and I love his lines about that you picked up. But you've not only picked them up, you've shown them about building bridges rather than walls, and you show the walls. You show the Wailing Wall, and then you intercut that with the wall in Palestine, dividing Palestine from Israel, and then you go to Mexico, and you get this amazing line where he talks about the cruelty of dividing families. It's very strong. And
I will tell you, Tim, something behind the scenes of this movie. When we premiered this movie in March this year on Discovery Plus, I got an email from the toy maker from Beverly Hills who wrote me how he was impacted by the movie, how he really impacted by the words of Francis, and how the eyes of these kids in the cages really, really affected him.
Yes.
And he offered to donate toy to every child inside of the detention facilities. And since that, we went to, again, same Texas, U.S.-Mexican border, and here in different detention facilities in U.S., in California, U.S.-Mexican border in California. And we distributed over 15,000 toys to the kids.
So Francesco has become part of your life now. This is you're not only publicizing the film, you've taken on the spirit of Francesco.
Listen, all my movies had the messages and call for action.
Yes.
Winch on Fire inspired uprising in Venezuela, Nicaragua, Chile. The beginning of Yellow Vest was inspired. I read the news. The Hong Kong, 2019, the whole Hong Kong umbrella situation was inspired by this. It was 27, 28, or 29 of July when 40 different locations in Hong Kong been watching the same movie. I have pictures. They reached to me. I can send you the clips from there, from the streets. So I saw how the movie can become advocacy, activism, and action.
Yes.
Same happened with Syria that you mentioned today. Every time we were finishing screening of Christ from Syria, people were asking me, hey, how we can help? What shall we do? So you see the trajectory that the movie is becoming this voice of humanity. You bring in through your art voices of innocent people who have been voiceless before. And through the large scope of the cinema, you're able to bring these voices who need to be heard in a bigger world. So at the end of the day, that became some kind of a part of my art where I can bring call for action. If you're watching the movie, through the entire movie, Pope is in a conversation. He's exactly like everybody else off camera, not watching into the lens of the camera like I am doing this right now. And he's in a conversation like every other character. And by the end of the movie, he's looking directly into the eyes of the audience and saying, hey, yes, we're living in challenging times. We're living in dangerous times. But that allows us to look forward to the changes, to bring the change that we definitely need. We need to be united. We need to overcome all these things. And that's the challenging times what they are giving us. And he looking directly into the eyes of each and every person, addressing this directly to the audience by the end of the movie, where the call for action comes. And that's the beauty of this thing. And he blessing people and saying, hey, don't forget to pray for me. I'm still here with you. Yes. That's the sense of
this is what he said at the when he first appeared on the balcony as well. So you know that was unexpected. But you do something very interesting in this film. You provide him with a defence as well, because one of the clouds which hangs over his papacy is the story of the disappeared in Argentina, and why did he not say anything? And you make it very clear. You give an opportunity in the film to talk about the power of silence, and that the power of silence is not doing nothing. The power of silence is being careful about when you speak. But I wondered if you'd thought of Pius XII, because the same question hovers over his papacy and has never quite been addressed. Why did he not speak out about the Holocaust? Because he knew about it in 1942.
There is, what I learned being in Vatican, there is certain things, and it's a state, and it's an institution.
And therefore diplomacy means you can't say...
Some popes deciding to talk, some popes not deciding to talk.
Yes.
Now, in terms of Jorge Maria Bergoglio, he clarified his thing, because through my movie, it was very important to bring summary to each and every action he's doing. And I think it's seen in every possible story that I'm bringing there, where he elaborates to me and to the viewer why he did this, what was his motivation. And I think here we're hearing his explanation. He explains why he was silent, and in the same time talking about these two Jesuit priests. I don't want it to bring any kind of summary to this story. I wanted to allow the audience to follow the story, where we can see from the beginning, same Estela Carlota or Pérez Esquivel talking about this and pointing, yes, he was accused and we are also in the same page. But then they are explaining based on a fact, which I am bringing there, that no, he not was exactly involved into this. And they giving a comparison. Pérez Esquivel explains exactly what happened to him personally and gives explanation to what Jorge did. And then same Sergio Rubin, who is also a journalist for the major newspaper Clarín in Argentina. And then I am bringing the headlines of the investigations done by the different reporters of New York Times, where they did interview these two priests. And the priest confirming that Bergoglio, instead of putting them behind, helped them to get out. So Bergoglio completely not been involved into their disappearance. Instead, he was helping them to get out of the prison. So we already learned this from the established facts. So here we go. But I didn't want to bring it as the summary to everything. I wanted the audience learn the investigation that I did as the storyteller and allow them to judge who's right and who is wrong, judge the history. And then I wanted Bergoglio to summarize why it was silent. And he explains this. And I will tell you something. I agree with him in that approach, because I sometimes felt also in a situation, specifically with the media, that it's rather to be silent than to try to express yourself. Because media sometimes, as much as I love journalists, they may not ready to listen to you or hear you. Yes. And I think that's the right approach that he explains. It's best to allow people to find the truth on its own, which I try to do on my own in this movie.
Well, I think there's another angle that you show very well. You show the path of him changing his mind, which seems almost unheard of. Again, how does a pope change his mind? Of course, a pope changes his mind. The idea of infallibility is very carefully defined, and a pope is not permanently infallible. A pope can change his mind. But I love the fact that one of the central parts of your film is the point where he talks about the bishops in Chile, and you bring up the whole issue of the abuse scandal, the sexual abuse scandal, and I think you've got Bishop Barops, and then also Fernando Caradima.
He's a priest.
He's a priest, and he was eventually defrocked.
He been defrocked. Secondary, he already dead.
Is he? I didn't know this. But Francis's first response is that this was slanderous, and he was quite dismissive, and this was widely quoted, and then he changed his mind completely, and he welcomes Juan Carlos
Cruz.
Yes.
Yeah.
And there's I think your interview with Juan Carlos is extraordinarily sensitive, because he was clearly sort of having a difficult time of the whole process, and he wanted this sign before he met the Pope, before he accepted the invitation to go to the Vatican, and when he accepted the invitation, it was to stay in the same place where the Pope is staying. This seems extraordinary and very human, and
but let's
very
take
generous.
A step back, Tim.
Go
let's
on.
take a step back. Francis open to criticism, which is also a really important element of the leader.
Yes.
We Americans suffered last 4 years from somebody who not was ready to accept criticism and not been able to admit any mistakes.
Yes.
And in general, leaders of the world, none of them wants to have a criticism, and none of them wants to have being accused in something. Francis is not afraid of having critiques criticizing him, and he's also open to learn. On a daily basis, he's learning. And that's, I guess, a beautiful thing of him in terms of a revolutionary leader. I think that's what makes him being a unique revolutionary role model as the leader and humanitarian, who's not afraid to admit things and step in and fix it. I think that's the beautiful thing of Jorge Maria Bergoglio. Now, yes, Juan Carlos and many others whom I interviewed, it was a remarkable thing. By the way, the whole footage from inside of Santa Marta between Juan Carlos and Pope Francis never been seen. It's all so exclusive, and it's actually never been seen from inside of Santa Marta, because Santa Marta usually of the limits in terms of filming. So I think the whole idea of being close to the people that Jorge Maria Bergoglio having since his priesthood started in Buenos Aires, since he became a priest, I think that's what he tried to show to the victims, being close to them, exactly as every priest should be. Because remember, the whole papacy idea for Jorge Maria Bergoglio is being close to the people, serve people. Because besides that he is the Pope, besides that he is the Bishop of Rome, he is a priest. And I think that's what he's trying to teach every bishop, every cardinal during his papacy, that they sometimes forgetting that they should be serving people. And I think Jorge Maria Bergoglio, by inviting Juan Carlos and all other victims to stay in Santa Marta next to him, he trying to show them that he is, first of all, the priest who wants to be close to his flock and wants to serve people. And that's what he did.
Well, this is a story that made headlines around the world when your film was premiered. That homosexuals have a right to a family. They're the children of God. They have a right. They have a right to a family. Nobody should be thrown out or made miserable because of it. I have one small question about this, about the filmmaking here, because there's quite a lot of edits at that point. Was he saying more?
Edits. I think he's seen actually on a screen when he's talking about these things.
Right, I see.
But in the same time, to keep Pope more than 20-30 seconds on a screen, I decided I don't want, because for me, much more important in that case is not just to having him like in 90 minutes with Charlie Rose,
yes,
but something like admitting is to show his actions and not just words. And that's what is remarkable, because every leader can come and say, hey, let's protect gay people. Hey, let's make them equal. But I think for me, what was more important, it's to bring the testimonies of the people and to merge this with his words.
Yes.
And like I said already, he's a man of action. That's why you're not seeing him much. But actually, these words, we do seeing him on a screen. And I think, again, for me, he emphasized to me many times, Evgeny, I'm a priest. And I'm quoting him word by word. When I was showing him this segment, I'm a priest. And for me, it is very important to care about every human being, no matter of his religious beliefs, no matter if he's a believer or not, no matter if he is color of the skin or sexual orientation. Every person is the child of God. And it's him, it's Jorge Maria Bergoglio. For what we admiring him, for his humanity towards every human being. And I think that should every leader learn from him. Should every cardinal, every priest should learn from him. Because first of all, he is a priest. His vocation is to serve people exactly like Jesus Christ was serving. Exactly like Jesus Christ never asked for the person, for his papers, for the child, like church traditionally asking before baptizing. Jesus Christ never asked for anything. He just was serving people. So I think in that case, Francis is a true follower of the Christ. And again, you hear this from the Jewish boy, not from the Catholic, not from somebody who is hysterically practicing any religion. You're talking to the Jewish raised, born boy from former Soviet Union, where I was studied atheism and later reconnected with my roots in Israel and living in the United States. So you're talking to somebody who is completely not biased to the Pope Francis or to the Catholic Church, but somebody who's been able through his work as a documentarian observe him as the man of the word and man of the action. And I think the whole situation with the civil unions just proved that for him, important to protect people, protect from any kind of discrimination, and allow people to live their life as they want to be in a community they want to be belongs, and being able to even raise the children. I think that's what this segment is proving and showing.
Well, it is extraordinary because you have a sequence. I think before that with two gay men who have a family with 3 children, and the Pope is very warm.
It's the same sequence.
It's the same sequence.
Story.
Sorry, yeah. It's a lovely, very warm sequence. But do you think the Pope is aware of the opposition within the Vatican to his reforms and to his actions? Or do you think there is no opposition?
No, first of all, there is a lot of opposition to a lot of revolutionary things that Pope Francis brings into this world. And I think, like in every situation, there is a fear of change from some cardinals whom I many met, and I know many of them who in opposition or literally fighting him fiercely, because I think what Francis brings to the church is transparency. He's trying to bring a lot of lay people in a big positions of Vatican. He's trying to bring
he's trying to bring women into
yes,
into positions of authority.
Women in the high positions of the Vatican. And I think for the macho institution, which been over 2,000 years around, it's the toughest thing to see all these transitions. And for many cardinals, and I don't want to pinpoint and point fingers, but I know many of them who are in a position, it is some kind of a change that they're still not ready to accept, but they are forgetting that the church is the church. And in order to move into 21st century, it must be some changes. It must be adaptation to the new world. Like it was a change from Vatican I to Vatican II. So it must be a change through the Vatican system. And I think what Francis is doing, he cleansing the soul of the church in terms of fighting the sexual abuse. It is, in my opinion, it's a cleansing soul of the church, because that's a really big issue. And we hear him. He's talking about this as the crime, as the monstrous crime. And I think that's the beauty of this Pope. That's the beauty of this leader.
But he is also very, very firm that Vatican II, there is no going back from Vatican II. Vatican II is a given, isn't it, for Pope Francis?
But if you will follow what he's doing right now, he decided to create for next 3 years different type of synod where he goes to the roots of the church, to the grounds of the church, and he wants to hear from the streets of the church and not from the top bishops who are trying sometimes to play their agenda. So I think that's exactly what he's trying to do. He's trying to reform church for the needs of the people, yes, and not for the needs of the bishops.
And the other thing you bring out, which I rather like, is the outreach of the Pope to other religions, to Islam, to Judaism, to Orthodoxy, and well, probably not very much need to say anything about that. But in the centre of your film is a sequence where he goes to Auschwitz, and I think you bookend the film with the silence of Corona, and right in the centre you've got his silence in Auschwitz, which I think is very, it sums up your film. I think it sums up the papacy, a man of action who can be active even without speaking, which is again very unusual for a pope. You'd expect a pope to be delivering sermons all the time.
I think I know this person that he sometimes not talking but doing things. Yes. I observed while I was in Vatican, while I was observing him and his actions. Sometimes he not talking, he just doing things. He is somebody who doing things sometimes behind the scenes for the people, for the sake of the people, which is amazing.
Yes. The only question that I've got really is about how could you dictate to, or how could a country dictate to this Pope that he must not use the name Rohingya, because they clearly did.
I think if you will take a step back for a second, he is a head of the state. And when you are on certain territory, when you are a guest of some other head of the state, you need to be respectful. And I think that's what he showed. He was showing respect to the government that was hosting him in Myanmar. And that was just a gesture of respect.
Yes. Yes. Now, look, what are you going to do next? Well, no, actually, I have a question before we get to this. Because there's something I've left out.
I think you nailed this already, because technically, what you just said, that in the middle of my movie, I have a beautiful segment on interface, if you remember that you said it.
Yes, absolutely.
And I think going to interface, it's something that I feel may help to resolve many conflicts of today.
Oh, gosh,
if you will
yes.
look at the same Rohingyas, it is something that between Islam and Buddhism. If we go into Middle East, it's a political thing between Jewish and Muslim, where actually some of the elements of the Islam used to provoke people against the Judaism. And there is no religion that teaches go and kill. So it means there is a lot of interpretations in today's world about the religious issues, and religion been used for centuries to create hate and put people one against the other. So I think through my work with Francis, I remember this year the famous theologian, Father Hans Kung.
Yes, he died last year, or this year.
No, it was March or April this year.
Yes.
And he wrote interesting thing. He said, no peace among the nations without peace among the religions.
Yes.
No peace among the religions without dialogue between the religions. No dialogue between the religions without investigation of the foundation of the religions. And I think that's kind of the thing that makes us to understand what Francis is doing. He's trying to unite people and bring people together of different faces and to show that we are all brothers. That's why last year, on October 3rd, he signed his third encyclical, which was called Fratelli Tutti, we all brothers.
Yes.
So I think that's what he's trying to do. He's trying to bring this universal theme of brotherhood, trying to bring people of different faces together, to show through the leaders of the faith that we are all equal and we all need to respect each other and spread humanity. I think that's what will be probably my next thing, diving into the stories of different religious and trying to show differences and trying to show where we all together and we all same. So I think that probably will be my next.
This will be very exciting. I hope you'll keep me in touch about this one. We share similar views there, I think. But I was going to say, the other question I have to ask you about is the music in Francesco.
You know, you touched interesting story of sexual abuse.
Yes.
In 2019, in February, I met another Chilean who was literally talking to Pope, talking to bishops, crying about his pain that he's still suffering from the sexual abuse. And then he was performing Bach on his violin in front of all these people. I was deeply touched by his story. And he was sold as the little child from his family in Chile by the Pinochet regime to the German family who adopted him. This German family gave him to the boarding school, which the brother of the former Pope Emeritus, Benedict XVI, was managing. And he was really abused in this school. And at the same time, he became a very famous musician. When I came to him and I said, can you tell us your story on the camera? He said, no. For me, the best expression is my music. It expresses my pain. It expresses my feelings. So I said, would you like to record the entire score of our movie on your violin? And he said, I can try. So I brought this guy to United States from where he was in Europe by this time, in November 2019. And it was 4 days of recordings in a studio here. And I remember how when he was leaving at the airport, he took my cell phone and said, I want to record something, but promise you will listen to this when I will leave. I remember how I was sitting in my car and crying because the words that he left on my phone as the video message for like almost 10 minutes were so emotional. He said that for him it was a healing. It was the most beautiful moment in his life that allowed him to heal through his pain. It was the most beautiful how the art can heal and how he, who never did something like